As the provost and the gentleman who introduced me said, I have an MA in religious studies. And in the university, there was always conflict with some of my feminist friends who would tell me, this religion that you're talking about, that you profess so much about, it's totally patriarchal. What are you doing there? And I said, well, are you part of the religion? Are you an ordained priestess? Have you ever taken part in these ceremonies? Because I believe that you're pretty much in the books, and you're not really going into the field. So being here tonight, it's an honor because I get to share not only my personal journey as a priestess, but also as a scholar, and what going into the field brought to me about this faith in general. So again, it's an honor. Thank you very much for having me.
That shine over there.
You'll want that on there too. So my journey began when I was born. I was born in California in 1975. And I say this as a very important part of this. I was born in a country that gives you freedom of religion. And many of us don't realize how blessed we are to have that here. My parents were born in communist Cuba, where religion was really not part of their upbringing at all. So the household that I grew up in didn't have a religious institution base at all. My father was a martial artist, and from a very, very young age, I was taught about Qi and Prana and Yin Yang and the Tao and the I Ching, because it was part of the martial arts. My mother, she was born in communist Cuba. Her family brought her over here. They tried to instill Catholic beliefs into her, which she totally rejected, because from a very young age, she showed spirituality, and she was kind of like a medium. She channeled energies, so she rejected it. So my whole upbringing was in a home that had no religious base, and it was fully spiritual. So while my friends were doing catechism, and they were getting into the Catholic Church and praying on Sundays, I was at home doing katas and, learning how to clear the air with smoke and, cleansing myself with eggs and flowers by a very young age. So what occurred with me was that growth and development that wasn't Judeo-Christian created in me this knowledge. I was a seeker. I wanted to know what my friends were talking about, this God that everybody was talking about. I didn't have that. So I went on my journey because I had the liberty, both through my family and through our country, to actually look for God. So by high school, I had already dealt with Buddhism, Catholicism, Hinduism. I was into esoteric magic, and I ended up being Wiccan for a very large period of my life. Wicca, for those who don't know what it is, derives from it's a neo-pagan religion, and the actual word Wicca means wise woman. So the Wiccan ideology, what they do is that they access the feminine by way of the mother, the maiden, and the crone. The maiden being the sensual young woman coming of age, the mother being a woman who has already given birth, and the crone being a woman after menstruation and into menopause that holds wisdom within her own being. Her being itself is wise. So being part of Wicca for a very, very long time, I had a coven, I had the whole thing, and I was very involved with the feminine and in finding myself and in finding God, or at least finding the divine within my being. Because again, Buddhism, it gives you the enlightenment. Esoteric magic gave me alchemy. I was learning from everywhere, and Wicca was really something that drew me to all of that. By the time that I was in college, I went to massage school, which kind of put it all together because of the Oriental background, the energy work, the chakras, all of that, the botany of it all. And I was really, really interested in Wicca. Then it happened. I had a family member who arrived from Cuba, and he was a young Babalao, which is a male Ifa priest. And one day, just sitting, having conversations, he's like, you're practicing the same thing that I practice. And I'm like, well, you practice something completely different. And Santeria, what you're talking about, these women that you are so much praising, we have a name for them. And I'm like, yeah, I have a name for her too. Her name is Lilith. And he's like, nah. We got Ochun, Yemaya, and Goya. And I was like, really? You know, but you know, I'm not into this Santeria thing. You guys do some stuff that I'm not really into. And he's like, you're doing it anyways. You just don't know. Okay, fine. So then, about a year later or so, we get invited to a drumming. And in this drumming, I see the whole regalia, the dancing, and here comes, they were honoring Ochun that night, or that day. And here comes Ochun. And Ochun possesses one of the conduits of the gathering. And like nothing I had ever felt before in my life. I had wind in my house, and I knew how to blow out candles, and you know the magic of it all. Now Ochun comes down to the earth. And I was petrified, because I was in front of the divine. I was like, wow, you know, God is here. And Ochun comes up to me, puts her hand in my heart, and said a couple of words to me. And that moment, I knew that God was with me, and that this was the faith that I wanted to get into. So I never left the Wiccan idea behind. I just started to kind of direct myself more into the Lukumi tradition, because I had finally encountered the divine terrestrially. So it was a huge deal for me. My search was over, I was there. Little by little, through my cousin, I started to receive certain ceremonial deities, my guerreros, my warriors, my leguas. And then through life, he moved out of the country, and here I am with these things, and I don't know how to really attend to them. A lot of flowers, a lot of spirituality, because what do? Through the grace of the Olorisha, my godfather, Olorisha, comes, and after, 2-3 years of interaction with him and my mother become very tight. He actually takes my mother out of her spiritual shell, starts to help her enhance her mediumship, starts to allow her to grow in her mediumship. And after about, my mom was 60 when she chose to become an ordained priestess. So during that time in her life, she shared that she would like for me to join her in her ordination and become an ordained priestess as well. So I went to Cuba, and in Cuba, I saw the pivotal role of women, not just the small role of women, no, the pivotal role of women. The women in the religion do everything. Everything. Our beaded necklaces, which are called neques, our ites, they're beaded by women. The sacred foods that we cook, people think that that's a menial job. This religion is always feeding and eating sacred, consecrated foods. It's part of us. So the person who's actually doing that food is a very, very important person. Aside from that, what we had there in Cuba is a family. As soon as I walked into Cuba, I saw that the religion was not just a religion, it was an extended family, right? So then all these women in Cuba were part of this machine, because it was like a machine. Because I would say 75% of the people that I met in my ceremony were all women, attending to me and attending to everybody. And that attention showed me that it's almost like the sum of all things. Yeah, you have the men who are doing major religious ceremonies, but the women are the ones who are the detail orientations. It's like a household. Okay, the man goes to provide, and then the woman does everything else. Everything else. So that's what I found in Cuba. And not only was it the artisanship of our eating, it was the sacred thrones, which we are born under, the birthing of a santo, or of an Olorisha, or of an individual being birthed. This idea of birthing, okay, comes from this creational aspect, right? So then the women, again, in Cuba, who were doing these beautiful altars and beautiful thrones, most of them had female They were ordained female Orishas. But it was not uncommon to see a male with a female Orisha ordained, right? Like with the Amaya, a male with the Amaya or a male with Ochun, be under that throne as well, creating those thrones. Because again, like Mr. Pichado said, it is not female genitalia or gender, it is the gender value of it all, the energetic value. So if a person is ordained with a female value, they can be under that throne, creating that birth. Okay. You guys with me? Mm-hmm. Okay, wonderful. Give me 1 second. So, not only were we talking about the altars, but the spiritual rebirth and the ordination is very much like what a woman does. A woman gets impregnated, right? The male steps out of the way, and it takes the woman 8.5 months to do her thing. Everything in her environment, everything that she eats, everything that she drinks, the things that the sounds, everything, her rest, creates this newborn being. So in Cuba, an ordination and that throne is very much the same. The men start the ceremony, the women create the birthing space, and then that birth of that neophyte has to be perfect. So it's very much like the womb and the woman. You guys with me? You understand what I'm saying there? Mm-hmm. All right. So upon the fertilization, the male retracts and the woman takes over. So generally the female energy is what prepares most of what we call our yaboraje or our birthing. Another intricate part, like we said, was the cooking. And the women are also in charge of the priesthood, like the actual ordination. Many people believe that it's only the men who ordain. It's not true. It's not only the men who do the divination. It's not true. The women that I was around during my ceremonies, most of them knew how to throw the pori shells or to do the divinational practice of the pori shells. One of my very close, like one of my madrinas, Caruca, she has hundreds of ordained priests under her. So it's not just the male misogynistic religion. It's not, because if you look at it in the standpoint of a different lens, you will notice that without the women of this religion will come to a halt. It will be a halt because they can't do anything without us. Isn't that great? So that's my observation. And aside from that, the main and most imperative ingredients of our religion and the need of it, the flow of the religion, because we come in as nurturers, we flow things. Nothing would happen, the alchemy would not occur if it wasn't for the feminine energy at all. So when somebody says that Santeria is misogynistic or it's a patriarchal religion and all, they subjugate women, it's not true. It's not true at all. You just need to know your role as a woman, and you need to know your role as the feminine energy, and take that stance, and you'll realize that we are very much balanced. Very much balanced. So in my conclusion, I would like to introduce Ms. Nidia Pichardo, which is a specialist in our sacred foods and adimus. And if it wasn't for people like her, our religion would halt. Thank you.